Welcome, friends. Today we have on the show a very special guest, retired Senator Mike Morrell from California. Mike Morrell was born and raised in California. He was first elected in 2010 as a Republican to the California State Assembly. In 2014, he won a special election to the state Senate, representing California's 23rd State Senate District. Senator Morrell has been named Legislator of the Year by the Military Officers Association of America. Additionally, Senator Morrell has been recognized as the AMPAC Connecting Faith and Business Community Leader of the Year, a National Federation of Independent Business, Guardian of Small Business, and received awards from the California Senior Legislature and the California Association of Licensed Investigators. He also holds the highest lifetime vote rating from the American Conservative Union. Senator Morrell is also the author of the recent book, The Road to Restoring the Family. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you for that kind introduction and generous with your words.
Senator, your book, tell us about the book and why you decided to write it.
Couple of things. My life, I've wanted purpose in my life from the time I was in my mid-20s. And one of the things that has guided me is something that from the wisdom of Solomon, who said the duty of a father is to leave an inheritance to his children's children, which goes beyond just the financial aspect, but also, morally, educationally, freedom of religion, property rights, freedom of speech. And so that's been sort of one of the things that has guided me, because one of the things I know is to have a strong America, you need a strong and stable family. And former slave Frederick Douglass, who eventually became a confidant to Abraham Lincoln, said that it's easier to build a strong family than it is to have to repair broken men. And when I look at the family as we're disintegrating, I think divorce in the 50s were like 2%. Today, we're up around 50%. And I've talked to men who are guards at prisons. Gentleman I know who's a counselor at a prison said the majority of men in his prison come from fatherless homes. And in fact, his particular statistic in the prison he was at, it was 94% of those men incarcerated in his place came from broken homes. And then you can see the same thing. My wife, Joni, was watching a special on prostitution one time on a news program, and they asked these young girls basically how they succumbed to prostitution, and all of them had daddy issues, and so you can just see that that's problematic. And when you go back to things like the Old Testament, just how God values marriage and the family, and very few places he says he hates things, but one of the things he says he hates is divorce. And you can see it right now. Even I've done studies, even man's health is healthier if he gets married once and stays married. And then financially, I was reading this one study that there's 4 ways to really get ahead in this world. Of course, you can be a Bill Gates and make $1 billion, but just for the average Joe, things like don't get in debt, don't spend beyond your means. But what's interesting, the number one thing is get married once and stay married, because you get divorced, you split the assets. And if you get divorced at 35 or 40, you got to start over again. And the sand's running out of the hourglass. And so, all the way around, marriage is good. Families are good. And as I kind of expressed to you earlier, when I was growing up, meeting different people, just how the family has disintegrated and how many problems there are. You can see all the way across the United States now. Going back to when I was growing up, there was always 2 or 3 problems. Right now, it just seems like almost all the foundations are fractured. And a lot of that does have to do with the family, as well as political and morally. But that's why after I termed out of the Senate, I wanted to try to leave and give the best advice to my kids, my grown adult kids, as they raise their children, what's the best way that they can live their lives to be an example to their kids, our grandkids, to increase their percentages of surviving and thriving in this very difficult culture, which is really against families today. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote it. And I talk about issues on marriage. I go into finances and education. I've got 2 chapters on, because boy, our educational system, if you look at our statistics, we're heading down, slumping down to third world nation status in a lot of the categories. And so I wrote on that, and because I wanted to do the best that I could to hope that my family thrives. And at first I was just writing these chapters, you might say, or letters, is what they were, to my children, to give to my grandchildren as they get older. And so my wife Joni was reading those, and she liked them and said, well, our grandkids are going to be raised with their kids. She says, I think you should turn this into a book. These letters that you're writing to our family, because they'll be useful, and hopefully, Lord willing, it can help enrich the lives of other people's loved ones.
Yeah, well, that's really brilliant. And it's getting rave reviews on Amazon too, by the way. It's got full 5-star reviews in the ratings. I wanted to read just a couple of the reviews that people left. One said, a beautiful testimony of a father's love and a wonderful resource for parents. There was another one here, which I thought they're all really great reviews. This book was written by a true statesman who demonstrated integrity, wisdom, and character. This book should unequivocally be a New York Times bestseller. It has endless life lessons interwoven from a biblical perspective with critical topics which include morality, freedom, civic responsibility, leadership, purpose, and duty. I highly recommend this book for everyone and every family. So, yeah, I mean,
well, thank you. And I didn't pay anybody to write
no,
any of those either.
Yeah. Well, you said a lot in there, the importance of keeping the family together. And, I know you've been influenced by the Bible and by Christianity. The Bible has some really strict teachings on marriage and divorce.
Yeah.
And it seems, people marry and divorce so loosely these days that it almost seems like a direct attack on the family. And also you mentioned the schools. What's happening to the schools in California?
Oh boy. Well, a couple of things. Let me go back to the beginning. The book, the classical 700 plus page book, Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville comes here and tries to discover, at the request of the government of France, the secret to our success. And he says things like, it wasn't in America's vast, rich commerce or her mines or her agriculture. He names dozens of things. It wasn't this, it wasn't that. He said, I found the secret of her success when I walked into the churches and saw the churches were aflame with righteousness. He said, America's great because she's good. If she ever ceases to be good, she'll cease to be great. Then another comment I read that goes along with that says, but if the churches are no longer aflame with righteousness, could it be that the people no longer know the truth? So going back into history, we had strong faith in this country, but many churches have gone user-friendly, seeker-sensitive, and they don't put, an emphasis on why we need to stay married. Before our years ago, there used to be a lot of pressure to stay married, that divorce was a stigma, right? Mm-hmm. And people say, well, that's unfair now. But then again, too, look at the families. I had a friend of mine who had 5 kids, or has 5 kids, and he was leaving his wife. And it was really for another gal, but he said, my wife's crazy. This is best for the kids. And I said, what do your kids think? And he said, none of them want us to get divorced. So even in supposedly a bad marriage, his kids didn't. Yeah. And so I think the church has a lot to do with it. And then what happens, politics is theology applied. In other words, things start in a pulpit and it works its way into politics. So as we've gotten away from those standards, politics has been that. And then the legislation, no fault divorce, all kinds of things. It used to be tough when men and women got a divorce. The courts used to side with the woman. The man used to really, he would be hurt more financially, everything. But through this equality thing, the women get hurt just as much as the men now. Before it kind of was a forced thing to keep men at home. You know what I mean? And I think those laws, even though they were tougher there and tougher on men, I think it helped keep families together. But they've made it easier and easier for men to sort of break away. And so I think the thing is that whole thing from faith all the way to the politics and everything in between, we've kind of let our guard down, and it's not good, and it causes a lot of other problems in society. They say our kids are depressed. There's a high rate of suicide amongst teens like we've never had before. So all those things, they should alarm us. And in getting back to education and those things, this thing on education goes beyond just sort of the immorality, the drag queen hours, which is, I don't know how a school could let a man in and who wants to dress provocatively in front of 5 and 6 year olds. But there's a Marxist ideology in education today that seeks to separate the child from the parent and make the child, a ward of the state, so to speak. And you go back to history, the pre-Weimar Republic and Soviet Union, you had children that were conditioned by the state to rat out their parents, And so that's why, I wrote 2 chapters on education because things are very tough. And a lot of these things start in California. So that's the downside. Let me share the upside. This is the first time in our lives all across the United States, but particularly here in California, a lot of parents are returning to school board meetings saying, we stop with the social indoctrination. We want our kids to simply learn so they can compete in a world economy. And so there are some signs of life. I was just 2 days ago, I was up in the Bay Area speaking, of all places, in the Silicon Valley I was at a big church. And boy, they really have a push on trying to get good people to get elected to the school boards to try to, bring common sense back to education. And so it was really encouraging for me. Again, in the Bay Area of all places, you had some people that are really committed going back to those school board meetings and realizing that our children are, they are the next generation, and America's either going to make it or break it. By the family, as well as part of that equation is education too, So I don't know if you remember in the Screw Tape Letters, a fictional account of 2 demons talking to one another, written by C.S. Lewis, said that, since this one boy has been a youth who Wormwood's supposed to try to destroy his life, he's had a dozen incompatible philosophies dancing about in his mind. And so the point is, whoever controls what goes in the mind, according to the Screw Tape Letters. And again, it's fictional about 2 demons, but it's kind of scary. Whoever controls what goes into the mind controls the soul. Whoever controls the soul controls that young man or woman's destiny, meaning either heaven or hell. And so it's such a practical thing about being real careful what we feed into the minds of our children, because eventually that's going to work itself down to their soul and eventually out into society as we see today. The walls are down, as Nehemiah said. Our country is fractured. A friend of mine, president of Hillsdale College, Dr. Larry Arnn, warns that we've entered into the 3rd great American crisis. And I think what he means by that is whether we're going to survive our constitutional way of life or descend into a despotic government ruled by force and fear. And I think it'll have an aggressive hostility. It is having aggressive hostility towards people of faith, but also the free markets. So anyway, sorry to take the long way along on that. But
that's why we're here, Mike. We want to hear what you have to say. But it really does have to take place at the grassroots level, right? At the local level, we all have to get involved. And we really need to fight for the kids, for our kids. What people have to understand, these are our kids. Whether you have kids or not in school, if we see things that we don't like for instance, during that whole COVID thing, I thought they don't unmask these kids soon, I'm going over there. because, and when you look at the statistics of what the lockdowns did to kids and what the masking did to kids, it was really devastating. These kids need to see the facial expression of the teachers. They need to see facial expression of each other. But it even goes beyond that. I think, they're trying to make boys think that they're girls and girls think that they're boys, and that's fine. And don't tell your parents, which is really just a phase. Kids go through phases, but especially this whole indoctrination. And these schools have these kids for what, like 7 hours a day. So I worked in the school system in California. I told you I lived in California for 15 years. Well, I worked in the school system for 15 years. And I have to say that the best schools, I was in public schools, charter schools, and private schools. And I have to say, if I was a parent, I would want to be sending my kids to the private schools, a carefully chosen private school.
Yeah, carefully chosen. Even some of those are getting carried away with the agendas that we face today.
Yeah. So what is going on with California as far as the legislation? I mean, what were you seeing when you were senator? I mean, there's soft on crime. There's this, seems to me, a normalization of pedophilia, that they're trying to pass legislation to normalize pedophilia. The altering of children's biology surgically or chemically is being normalized in California. And of course, there's the homeless problem, which was bad when I was there. I was there about 3.5 years ago. When I was last there, it was pretty bad. But what I'm hearing, the homeless problem's even worse now in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. What's going on in California politically? I mean, it's a beautiful state.
You kind of hit the nail on the head, that we have a responsibility to get in and advocate for our families. You know, what I find interesting is the Constitution. My personal opinion, I think the founders would put more of the blame. They would blame the politicians, but I believe they would put more of the blame on we the people. That's why the Constitution starts off, we the people, a government of, by, and for the people. So they meant for this government for us to run it. You know, the Declaration of Independence starts out by saying that to secure our rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So we give our consent how we want to be ruled. And so California, this once great state, we the people have I mean, here's one thing about term limits, which I think is kind of interesting. A lot of people think that's if we have term limits, going to solve the problems across the board. Freedom is not a 1 or 2 step solution. It's a long, hard fight. It's a long road to keep us free. And in California, we've had term limits for almost 20 years. But we, the people here, we keep electing worse people. Our state's gotten worse since term limits, right? And remember, in Article 1, Section 8, I believe it was, the founders put in what I believe are term limits, but they call them elections. We, the people, have the right to vote in Congress folks, members every 2 years or get rid of them, right? Same thing with governors and president. And so we've got to take back our state. And in California, after being in the Republican Senate, there's just a lot of my fellow Republicans, as well as citizens, we have neglected our civic responsibility, and very few even begin to understand the very basic premise of the United States Constitution, and that's you know that is really key to our freedom, because again, it's about the responsibility and the duty of each individual citizen to exercise their civic responsibility, to take this very serious. And so one of the things, we've let our guard down here, even our politicians, like I repeating my second time, we have failed to communicate clearly the things we believe. But what I've noticed is when we do communicate clearly, we can win elections. So there's been some districts that they lean Democrat. But if you get a good candidate that actually understands how to communicate clearly, and when they do it like Reagan, with a smile on their face, you don't have to be mean or you know, antagonistic, but with a smile on their face, like Reagan did, a nod of the head and a wink of the eye, we can win. And so I don't think all hope is lost. And what's interesting is we're starting to pick up seats in nonpartisan races like city councils and school boards, where you know, we don't put whether Republican or Democrat, but we just simply are elected based on what we clearly communicate. And so we're picking up seats on that way, and that hopefully that's a bottom up movement that'll get better as we go. But we still have a long ways to go before we restore order to the state. But it shows you what happens when Edmund Burke sums it up that evil only triumphs when good men, and we can add today, when good men and women do nothing. And the second thing is too, we the people, especially people of faith, we think we have to be silent. This politically correct speech is there to silence us because they know they can't win the argument. So they try to shame us or intimidate us by not talking out. And whenever we're silent, it only emboldens evil. And so I think the thing is, we have to, probably the most important thing we have to do as citizens and people of faith and people who love our country, we have to speak out. The scriptures tell us to do that, is to refute bad ideologies and arguments, right? And so it's key, and we have to have some courage to do that. The scriptures tell us that the fear of man will cast a snare, and that's another thing. Getting back to politics, I've seen a lot of my friends who, you get a little pressure on you in the state Senate and the state assembly by people in your district and by fellow people across the aisle. Tremendous amount of pressure. But whenever you start to cave in and fear in people, usually you end up making bad decisions. And so you have to distinguish between your principle and your preferences. You can compromise your preferences, but don't compromise your principles. And the last thing I'll say on that, which I learned early on when I was in the legislature up there, that there were some people in my party who I thought were like, rhinos, as they call them, compromisers. And they either termed out, didn't get reelected. And then I would see them make comments on Facebook, and they turned out to be very conservative people.
Wow.
And it made me realize when they were in office, they got a little nervous, but yet when they had the golden microphone, God gives them an opportunity to make a difference. They didn't do it because they feared maybe losing the next race. But then when they get out of the office, they get vocal when no one is listening anymore to them, And so that spoke heavily to me. And I kept, one of my prayers was, I don't want to leave this office, and I don't want to have any regrets saying I wish I could have, would have, or should have done X, Y, and Z. And so not that I was perfect, because I certainly wasn't. And there was often I got weak kneed, because it's a difficult place. But
Sure.
I always had that in mind, to try to not, to try to give away some of your preferences, but not your principles. So that was sort of a guiding thing that helped me stay as centered as I could.
Well, we really do need bold and courageous leaders, and we do get the government that we deserve at the end of the day. But is our vote really counting? What about vote fraud? Is that something we're contending with?
If you say that, you're a conspiracy theorist, but I'll tell you what happened to me. In 2010, when I got elected, I was at a house, and a guy from the local newspaper was there. So the polls closed at 8 o'clock. At 8:30, the first votes came out. And it said on the TV screen, 3% of the votes counted. I was 8.5 points ahead, 8.5 points ahead. And so the newspaper guy said, Mike, would you like to give a victory statement? And I said, well, if you notice on the screen, only 3% of the votes been counted. He says, I've been doing this for 30 years. Whatever it is right now, it'll be that way in 2 weeks. So I gave him a statement. 2 weeks later, I won by that 8.5% margin. 2 years later, in 2012, I was 9.75 points ahead by that first 8:30 counting the votes. And then I started losing, and losing each day that went by. So, man, I got down. I went from 9.75 points ahead to 4.5 points ahead. And every day I was dropping votes. So back then, the county voters register would allow us to come in. And I hired a team of 18 college kids, and they were allowed to stand behind each of the people counting. They just could not bother them. They had to call the floor manager if they wanted to challenge everything, something. And I remember, though, one of these college kids spotted something, and it was crazy where they were counting their votes. And the one gentleman noticed, who was working for me, that though they were counting those votes, they were getting through people that actually didn't live in my district. Somehow those votes ended up. And so anyway, if I remember correctly, I think we ended up throwing out and challenging and actually getting about 5,200 votes thrown out. And so that was the first that I mean, that I recognize that this is a problem. If that happens 3 or 4 times, I can see it. But when you're over 5,000 times that happens, I remember warning my party that there's something wrong here. There's something wrong.
Something is really wrong. I think we need to get rid of the machines, have to go back to paper ballots.
Yeah.
And
well,
go ahead.
This one actually then was paper ballots. And I figured out sort of how the scam works there, because there's 1,000 ways to slice a pig up, right? And so I figured out a couple of ways they were doing it, not just machines later on, but without, when you go to the to vote the poll, you don't have to show, they took away, you don't have to show your driver's license, right? And then also you can buy through different websites voting people who you can find out. You can't find out who they voted for, but you can find out, like, out of the last 10 elections, who votes regularly, and then who's registered, who doesn't vote. And so I think one of the scams is, since I can get that for free and you can get that information for free, I think you have people going in and they know typically who's a low propensity voter who more than likely is not going to show up at polls. So they go in the last hour or two before the polls close and they start sending people in because they already know these people are registered, but they rarely show up. And so I think that's one of the ways they do it. And I'm sure there's other ways. And so taking IDs away was a bad thing. And again, I experienced what I believe was fraudulent. We threw out, like I say, over 5,000 votes. And I warned the party. And then over the years, things just got worse. So I realized we had to win by, we couldn't just win by 2 or 3 points, because that margin would be eaten away. But yet, going back to 2010, that reporter was right. At 8:30, I had 8.5% ahead. 2 weeks later, I was still 8.5%. But that changes over the next 2 years. So go figure, right?
Yeah, and when you talk about, paper ballots, there is evidence of what do they call it, ballot stuffing of the box. 2020 election, I thought, was just horrendous. There's so many anomalies in that. And, you had the whole COVID debacle where, with all these mail-in ballots and whatnot. I believe that we need same-day voting. You show up in person. You need very special circumstances where you'll mail in a ballot. Like say I'm back here taking care of my parents and my residence is still California. Okay, I think I should maybe write a letter and get permission to get a mail-in ballot. Yeah. But otherwise, same-day voting, paper ballots, in person with voter ID. And I think it was in Georgia, they were trying to make that out like that was racism or something. How is that racism?
So, no, it's just keeping honest people honest.
Just keeping honest people honest is correct. And I'll tell you another thing I'm really suspicious of. I know people have called me a conspiracy theorist, so I'm used to it by now, but I'm just looking at the data. I really have no way of knowing, but I was very suspicious about the recall election as well, because I know that there are certain people who benefit from having this particular governor. You talk about communism and Marxism. I think that this is a Marxist attack on America. Well, right now is what we're seeing.
It is. You can go back to Saul Alinsky, right? And his book on how to destroy America. And then you look at some of the people that admired him, like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and others, people who, go very deep in our government. So there are conspiracies, Christ was conspired against. Wasn't Caesar Ute Brute? Not you too, Brutus, And so, usually the people who are calling you a conspiracy theorist, they're the conspirators, And so, we can't be foolish, we have to put some trust, but, one Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I think I've said enough on that. But yeah, we have some problems, and we're going to have other elections stolen if we don't stand up. But my fellow Republicans get a little nervous by calling that out because again, there's name calling that they're prejudiced, and that's not prejudice at all. To guard vote is one of the most precious things. The founders sure believed in that after living under tyranny for all the years that they did under British rule, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to call it out. We have to. We, like you said, we have to speak up. We have to make our voices heard. And if we think that there was a thing that I'm convinced that there was in 2020 and 2022, but 2020 had to be the worst election I've ever witnessed in my life. I mean, it was a little more underhanded in the past, but I think possibly even, this is going to sound like a bold statement, in the 2020 election, I think California could have possibly gone red had it not been for blatant voter fraud.
Well, uh, just common sense. I went to bed around midnight, and all those swing states were all leaning pretty heavily in favor of Donald Trump. And then they shut off the voting machines, if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And then 4 a.m, they turn them on again. And miraculously, Biden was ahead. And so maybe that was all honest, ethical, and moral. But I mean, it just, some things don't make sense. And that was one of them to me. Let me tell you another one, bring up a subject you mentioned earlier. Look at when that COVID happened, I was scared. I had fear because I'm thinking, man, everything you hear. But I remember when I finally kind of decided what I thought was going on, there was two things. The first was we were standing outside of a restaurant with a bunch of friends of ours. There was 8 of us in this party, and there was a sign, keep your mask on and social distance 6 feet apart. And remember, we're outside in the fresh air. It was wintertime, so the air was pretty clean, right? And again, 6 feet apart, wear your mask outside in the fresh air. But when you go in and you were able to sit down with someone sitting a foot from you is when you could remove your masks. And I remember thinking, something's not right there. Where's the common sense on that? And I'll tell you another thing too, that later in COVID that I read, kind of to confirm my suspiciousness, there was an article, if I recall it accurately, in the Wall Street Journal, and they made a point that influenza, deaths from influenza was really down, and perhaps we were on a pathway to eradicate deaths from influenza, right? And yet they had no empirical data. They didn't explain why. What were we doing to prevent these things? Well, as you know, many of these hospitals got I don't remember what the fee was, or $14,000 for every COVID death you had.
13,000, yeah.
13,000. So you had a lot of people believing that hospitals were, older people who die of influenza. That's the highest death rate. And also they were the highest death rate of COVID. There's some people that speculate a lot of those people who died from influenza probably or who reported COVID really died from influenza because they have a fever, sweats, cough, congestion, and
basically the same symptoms. My personal belief, they were just renaming it. They were renaming everything. I mean, it got to the point if somebody jumped off a bridge, they'd bring them in and put it down as a COVID death. I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but really,
I know there was a joke about a man who parachutes out of a plane, his parachute doesn't open and he falls to the ground, and the doctor rules death by COVID, right? But the thing is that article in that paper, they were never able to explain, where the empirical data was or the medical history, why we were on our way to eliminating influenza. And I remember just thinking, well, we'll see in a couple of years once COVID stops, I bet you those figures will come back up. So there was a lot of inconsistencies. And again, I don't think I am a conspiracy theorist, but then again, too, I'm not a chump for standing outside 6 feet apart.
There are sinister agendas afoot. I mean, things that are being manipulated behind the scenes for the benefit of certain groups of people, certain financiers, let's put it that way. I mean, the open border, for instance. I mean, there are people benefiting from this open border, and it's not us. It's not the American people. This is a direct attack on America. I believe we've been infiltrated.
Well, hey, no one ever gave me a free cell phone, right? So anyway, yeah, so those some challenges. And, I think the founders had it right. Lincoln said that on immigration that we want people, he said the electric cord that ties us together. And somebody mentioned to me they didn't have electricity then, but I found out what he meant is they used to take a rope and dip it in the compound and element. I forgot what they dipped it in, but then it would glow at night, And so he talks about that the electric cord that binds us together is the Declaration of Independence. And you go through there, what do they believe? They believe in the four organic utterances of God, that there's a creator, monotheistic, one God. They believe in divine providence, that we're to pledge our lives and our love and our sacred honor to our fellow countrymen and women, right? And then the supreme judge of the world. And then I forgot what the fourth one is. But anyway, nevertheless, I know the laws of nature and nature's God, that there is self-evident truth, because today we live, our young people are guided by moral relativism, and that there is no such thing as truth. No. But the Declaration, the second paragraph starts out, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? And it goes through what those truths are. And you can find out truth according to the laws of nature, nature's God, which the founders meant. If you look at history or human nature, or you look at nature's God, what we would call the scriptures, you can find self-evident truth. And by the way, just a little side note, you might find this interesting. When Supreme Court Justice Thomas, from my understanding, was being confirmed to the Supreme Court, he was asked by a then senator what would be his guiding principles for making these decisions. And Thomas said, well, according to the laws of nature, nature's God, the first paragraph of the Declaration. And apparently the senator said, sarcastically, where did you get that from? Well, it turns out that senator was Joseph Biden, right? And enough said. So we know what he thinks as he says, the things, the documents. He doesn't even know what they're called, right? And I think he's an enemy of those things, right? And so we've got people at the top who they're certainly not guided by the principles of limiting government's power. They want more power. We've got a fourth branch of government now. There was only meant to be three, and that's a bureaucratic state. We've got thousands of unelected bureaucrats running government, telling us how to raise our kids, how to educate our kids, how business should be done. Here in California, they just did the minimum wage for fast food workers for $20, but they appointed a commission of people who's going to review, every 3 years, I think it is, whether, to raise, and they're going to monitor these restaurants, how they treat their people. Forget about the free markets. That is definitely laced with Marxist rhetoric.
It is.
Yeah.
This country was founded on a document which is morally and divinely inspired, I believe. And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely it was. It's the greatest document outside the scriptures that were ever penned by human beings. And a lot of people too, I just want to share with us, I think some people think freedom is easy. And July 4th, everybody showed up in Philadelphia and they penned that document. I've got a book on my bookshelf over here that the founding period was considered the book is 1730, the founding era, 1730 to 1805. These things did not take place overnight. It took years for this to happen. Once the Declaration was signed, there was a war for 7 years. And then after that, it took 6 years to draft the Constitution. And then after that, we had to elect a president. And so freedom, like I say, it's a long, hard road, but it's things we have to take serious. Why God put us here on earth is to set people free, not make them wards of the state.
And I think what's happening today will be our test. Either we step up or we don't, because things are really not looking good as they are.
Amen to that.
One of my favorite quotes is from Gandhi, and he said, "Those who believe religion and politics aren't connected don't understand either. What would you say?
Well,
to
that's a
that?
good. I have not heard that one, but I would agree with him. Um, there's two things that you and I grew up with that we were told we shouldn't talk about: is religion and politics. But yet, in the course of human history, you see the two primary ways it seems that men oppress other men and either send them into 1,000 years of bondage or set them free are through those two institutions. And Washington was asked why the success of America. And he said it's the first time in human history where the best of Jerusalem intersected Athens. And Jerusalem's the home of religion and Athens the home of politics. So again, religion and politics, those are the two most important things, as Gandhi states, as Washington states. And I remember growing up, my dad told me, hey, there's two things you shouldn't talk about: religion and politics. And again, those are the two most important things. You know, those things separate people. So there's something really important about that, and making sure we get it right to be able to get, you know, to win as many of those debates as we can. It's important that we understand those things. And by the way, I talked to you earlier about the Constitution, we the people and stuff. You know, the scriptures are the same way. The ball's in our court. In Second Chronicles says, if you want your land to be healed, God states in there, if my people do X, Y, and Z. In other words, it's conditional. And the conditional word is if my people stand up and do the right things, God will heal our land. And so not only do the scriptures tell us that the ball's sort of in our court, why I have hope for America, but our Constitution puts the responsibility and the ball squarely in our court. So we have to stand up and do the right things.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed, and we have to be vigilant. That's clear.
Amen.
So, Senator Mike, where can people find this book, and where can they find you? How can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, a couple of things. It's Senator Mike Morrell at GOP, and then my book's available on Amazon. And you can just go there and you can type in the title of the book, which is The Road to Restoring the Family. Oh, and by the way, I want to show you this picture. I don't know if your guys can see it or not, but I love it. It's a father walking down a dirt road with his son, holding his son's hand. It's touching to me, you know.
Beautiful.
And that's why I picked it. I thought it was the publisher didn't pick it. I did, because I think it sent a really strong message, and it's one that a lot of people like, especially moms. You know, they like that, to see the father involved.
Beautiful.
And in that picture, yeah, it is a beautiful picture. And so all I wanted to do is be able to advertise that on Facebook and Instagram. Not anything about the book, no wording, just a picture of the book, The Road to Restoring the Family, and that's it. And they have not allowed me to do that. They've rejected my ad 4 times.
Incredible! I'll tell you,
this is incredible.
This is a real satanic agenda. I'm just going to say it. I mean, the censorship has just been outrageous. I've been feeling the brunt of it. I lost my YouTube channel of 8 years, Facebook, Instagram. They've got me shadow banned, which I might have fairly large following, but maybe 5 or 10% can even see what I post. They've got this whole thing now. They call it freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach, which is the philosophy of some of these big tech platforms. And this is an absolutely direct attack on the Constitution, on the First Amendment.
Well, and very simply on the family. There is nothing bad about this book. It's so, I mean, to me, it's innocent. It's beautiful. It's needed. I hope it'll enrich the lives of people by it. And so if you go in and you can type the title in on Amazon, The Road to Restoring the Family, or my name, Mike Morrell, Morrell. So either type in The Road to Restoring the Family, it'll pop up, or my name, Mike Morrell, and then they can purchase it, which I hope they will. And by the way, one of the things too I'd like to share with your audience is the demographic that has blown my mind every single time that I speak. And every single time I get people with adult children buying multiple copies, because they have been alive long enough to see the America we grew up in and they miss that, and they see the road ahead, and they're concerned for their children and their grandchildren. So because as I sign books at these places, these conferences I go to, they'll say, make this happen to my son Matthew, or my daughter Kristen, or my son David, because they have kids, and we're hoping, so we're going to give each one a book type of thing. So that's something that's really sends a strong message to me that people probably 50 and older who saw America for what she was, and now they see the road, the pathway we're on, by multiple copies. Boy, that gives me hope. On the other side too, they're very concerned about the future of their kids.
That's a good sign. People are seeing what's happening, and hopefully trying to do something about it.
Amen, Mark. Amen.
Well, Senator, it's been great. Thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, you asked some very good questions. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. I appreciate that very, very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.